pretty damn good. In political news, this past Tuesday was a big day for the presidential aspirants of election year 92. It's a day when there were all kinds of primary elections and delegate caucus votes across the country. We're going to take a brief meditative break here in the woods outside of town, but we'll be back with an in-depth look at the thriving Seattle music scene, so don't go away.
Well, when you're growing up in Seattle, what was Seattle best known for?
Oh, a bucket of clams. Fish. Fish.
Bud's fish and chips.
Rain and lumber.
Brick roads. A lot of brick roads in the hills.
The Seattle Pilots. Not the Mariners. Psychotic television shows, espresso and rock and roll.
It's like, you know, San Francisco in the 60s, you know, it's like the summer of love or something around here. It's really cool.
The winter of love.
The winter, the rainy season of love.
Welcome back to the Week in Rock from Seattle, where right now we're checking out one of the city's thriving local institutions, the drive-through espresso stand. How you doing? This coffee thing is totally out of hand here. Let's see what we have. Thank you. My fifth cup today. I'm more wide awake than I've been since 1987. As you probably know, Seattle is now the hottest music city in the country at the moment, but it didn't all start with Nirvana or Pearl Jam. The city's musical history goes back to the late 50s and includes such noted native sons as the late Jimi Hendrix, among many others. Take a look.
S-E-A-T-T-L-E. In the past year, Nirvana, Soundgarden, and Pearl Jam have sold millions of records. And a lot of attention's been focused on the fact that they're from Seattle. But this city has had good musicians coming out of it for decades. Jimi Hendrix grew up here, and this house in South Seattle is where his father holds a memorial to him. Tell me the story of him getting his first guitar. Did you help him get it?
Oh, yeah. I went, there's an acoustic guitar. I had to pay $5 from a friend for it.
Really?
And after he got good on that, then I went and got him an electric guitar.
What was it like when he came back to the Seattle Center Coliseum to play?
He kept talking about it. It's been 5 years since he'd been home. I always thought he'd make it in music, maybe playing in cabarets.
And then all of a sudden you have him playing to this huge Coliseum.
Yeah, I had to pinch myself.
Where do you fit in there in terms of sound?
The hardest rock and roll band, first and foremost, and that's how we fit in. We went to this club here on Valentine's Day, and it was a heart tribute night. We didn't know exactly how to feel, you know, because like some of these bands were going like, doing total, whatever it's called, grunge or whatever it's called, like Barracuda, you know, it was like, oh God, what have we created here?
Heart's probably an influence of all, you know.
They're still an influence. They're a great band, but they were the only ones you could really look to locally that had gone beyond the top 40 cover circuit.
How do you feel like you fit into the Seattle scene now?
We're a part of it. I think we've helped bring some focus to the area. We're certainly not a part of the recent explosion. Our band's been around for 9 years. I hate to think that we're sort of, you know, the old school.
As far as the rap scene is concerned, everybody wanted to sound like New York. Now that, you know, then they started doing the Compton thing. People started realizing that we were being dismissed. So we came up with our own sound. I think if Seattle gets accepted, it's almost dangerous. Keep me pissed, I write good songs.
Well, there's one side of the Seattle music scene, but there's also a more subterranean, grungier aspect to it, too. And Tabitha Soren recently rounded up the lads in Soundgarden to take her on a tour of it. Let's see what she saw.
Seattle is the kind of environment where bands communicated with each other. They played each other their favorite records. They did shows together and so forth.
Is there any Seattle scene?
This was the scene. We'd go and see the shows that were put on by the U-Men, and we'd go see these guys, and these guys would come see us, and everyone would go see these guys.
Sometimes we would open for these guys, so it was like, oh, sweet play, and then these guys would come out.
Soundgarden, Soundgarden, Soundgarden.
So this is actually where you got the name from for the band?
Yeah, we didn't name ourselves after the sculpture. We just liked the name.
This is where Nirvana lives now.
There's a light on in Kurt's room, so we just get his attention.
Kurt! Chris!
Nirvana, Nirvana, Nirvana.
We were just jamming in this shack and moved out of town, started playing gigs in Seattle, made a tape, Sub Pop heard it, and the rest just keeps snowballing.
Before this was a strip club, it was a pretty happening local bar, and we
The Rainbow Tavern.
We played with a lot of bands here, one of which was Green River, who you might know some members because they're in a band called Pearl Jam. Pearl Jam.
Anytime you have a place where a lot of people are playing music and influencing each other and not having this big, broad microscope on it, things can get pretty mutant and then they can develop into their own thing.
This is a disco, it's called the Vogue, and like a couple of slow nights a week when people aren't dancing, they put bands in here, and Soundgarden played here a few times. Really everybody in the local urban Seattle scene played here. In fact, the first time...
What's your sign?
First time I ever saw...
Alice in Chains, Alice in Chains, Alice in Chains!
Why don't you tell me what the biggest misconception about the so-called Seattle music scene is?
Soundgarden and all that moved to major labels, and then everybody else needed a Seattle band.
So there is really no Seattle sound at all. Just a lot of sounds coming out of one area that people are paying attention to.
So where are you taking me now?
Well, we're actually through taking you anywhere. We've shown you Seattle.
Seattle's a nice place.
It is. So, shut the door when you leave.
Is this goodbye?
Yeah, it is. I'm sorry. We're home now.
All right.
And,
I'll see you later.
We'll call
Thank you
sometime. Bye.
Do some laundry.
Wipe your feet before you... Sorry. All right.
Seattle Rock 1992, a guided tour. Behind me right now is the famous Seattle Space Needle, a 605-foot tall remnant of the 1962 World's Fair here. We're going to take a quick break right now, but we'll be back with a look at some of the up-and-coming new bands of Seattle and Tad Lowe's look at the campaign workers behind the political campaigns of 1992, so don't go away. Welcome back to the Week in Rock from Seattle, where right now we're wandering around one of the oldest parts of the city, a district called Pioneer Square. A few years back, this was the beating heart of the Seattle rock scene. The club action has dispersed a bit since then, and of course there's a whole gang of new up-and-coming bands around, each of them no doubt hoping to become the next Pearl Jam or Nirvana. Tabitha Soren's been checking some of these groups out, and right now, here's her report.
Seattle has a great history of small, independent record labels, starting back in the 60s with Etiquette Records, and then in the early 80s, Pop Llama Records started, and in the late 80s, Sub Pop became famous for being the home of grunge rock. But grunge rock is not all the Seattle music scene has to offer.
The biggest misconception about Seattle music is that there is one sound.
There's some really good pop bands from Seattle. We're a band that would make our own records rather than sit around waiting for someone else to say your music's okay. You just put it right out there and say, this is our music, we like it, take it or leave it.
We rely less probably on volume. We don't bury our vocals as much. They kind of stand out over the top of everything else. We're not a metal band, we're not a hard rock band, we're not a grunge band, but there's like elements of all these different things in there.
We're loud, hard, annoying, kind of ugly.
But what we've all heard about is the so-called grunge rock from Seattle. Grunge is not a term Seattleites are particularly fond of.
Grunge is stuff that gets on your dishes that you try to scrub off.
How sick are you of talking about the Seattle music scene?
Fairly sick.
I think Mudhoney is sort of a combination of Gordon Lightfoot and Erasure.
We're right there on the cutting edge.
Woo!
Large, big
stinking, unoiled machine that smokes a lot, rows a lot, about ready to fall apart and blow up at any moment, but it never does.
We are pretty much a rip-off of every musical style except for funk. We don't play like the rock clubs. We play all ages shows. We target mostly like kids as our audience because I feel like that's where most of the energy is.
Tad is not really the same as Nirvana. Mudhoney is not really the same as Soundgarden, but, you know, to somebody like in Minnesota reading an article about Seattle, they're probably going to think that, yeah, that's just, you know, they all sound the same, they all come the same thing, but, no, it's not true.
Well, there you have it. Look at the up-and-coming bands of tomorrow from Seattle. Right now, we're down in the city center at the Pike's Place Market, a fresh seafood lover's paradise, where our question of the week is, which of this year's presidential candidates does this fish most closely resemble? Take a good look. Answer according to your political persuasion. I think you've got it. I think we know. All right, let's get this thing out of here. Yo, my God. Brilliant. Speaking of politics, our man Tad Lowe has been out on the campaign trail recently, taking a look at the people who do all the work behind the scenes, the campaign workers. Let's see what he's found out. Trail. That about does it for this edition of The Week in Rock from Seattle, a really great music scene. Do pay a visit if you have a chance. Just don't all come at once. We'll be back with The Day in Rock on Monday. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you then.